I'm Dr. Mohamed Noor, and this is the Shuttle Pod Show. Damn it, Jim, I'm a biologist, not an engineer.
He's a doctor, not an engineer.
Gonna go and do my convention thing. Got my costume, I'm going now. Yeah, we're having a ball. It's Star Trek, y'all. Hey, teleporter, beam me up.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Shuttle Pod Show. Today we have very special guest, Dr. Mohamed Noor. We'll be answering your fan questions, doing some Star Trek trivia, finding ourselves on Connor's remote island, of course, and much more. As always, our Patreon members get a full extended version of this episode. I'm Erica LaRose, but before we move on, we have a special message from Andy Robinson.
Like, subscribe, and join us on Patreon.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Andy.
Heat him well.
Yeah, where's the AC up here?
Yeah,
Andy?
we need air conditioning.
It's hot.
Very hot.
And now
Good to see everyone.
for your hosts, Connor Trinneer and Dominic Keating.
Hey, guys.
We're all back together.
We're
got
all
the
back
band
together.
back
The band is back together.
Yeah,
Finally.
yeah, you had
a bit banged up.
Well, we're the three Bs. You're burned, you're bruised, and I'm broken.
And he broke his toes.
I broke my toe.
Oh, you weren't even joking.
No,
No, he's not. He was running to look at a shark on the beach in Malibu on Saturday night.
It was late at night.
This is not a bullshit story.
This is full on. I was in Malibu on Saturday night, and night being the important word here. And I don't know, there might have been some tequila involved.
There might have
but
been.
that's irrelevant. And somebody said, "Hey, we caught a shark." And I was like, and they said, "Who wants to pet it?" And I was like, "I want to pet the shark." So I got up.
Yeah,
and
there was tequila.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, normally I wouldn't say that.
Yeah.
And I sprinted over there, and I didn't see this log, and I kicked it, and I was like, that's gonna hurt later. And I
don't want to pet the shark.
Yeah, I petted the shark, and then I got back, and I was like, I think I broke my toe.
Yeah. Don't you usually jump the shark? Then,
Well, you got to pet it first. You got to get near it.
I'd like to follow up from Sunday and just thank everyone who stepped up and became Patreon members and donated to the show. We can't thank you enough. It's that kind of support we need, and please keep it coming. Also, I would like to thank Sandra Bucket. I'm wearing one of her T-shirts that she gave me for my birthday. And on a slightly sadder note, her sister passed away. I wasn't aware, particularly on Sunday, Sally. So my condolences to you, Sandra. And I know that she had this beautiful painting, which I did preview on Sunday, commissioned for me, which is really lovely.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, God bless her.
Is that a cardinal and
It is a cardinal and a blue and a red tit.
No, the cardinal's the red one, and then there's a
what are those ones
I have
called?
this wrong. It's like the state
Blue jay.
bird of Washington. No, it's a yellow and black bird.
State bird of Washington.
The official name.
The yellow and black bird.
The official
Apparently,
yellow
God
black
bless
Showing off
her.
our biology skills already.
The show that she liked watching in the last days, God bless, was that sitcom Desmond's.
No, really?
Yeah, I know. With subtitles, I should imagine. Anyway, thank you, Sandra. Number one fan. So, with that all said, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Treks and Trekkers, we are delighted to have in the Golden Throne chair this morning, I think if my math is right, our fourth Doctor, with the caveat that it is in fact our first real one. Let's not beat around the bush with that.
That's right.
That's very funny.
Yes, a doctor. He's been a professor, of course. He's been a dean. He is now a provost. He is a massive Star Trek fan. He has contributed to the fandom enormously. And I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Mohamed Noor. Welcome to the show, sir.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. And to mention, too, of course, I'm a Patreon of the Shuttle Pod Show as well. So.
Let me go back over that.
Thank you for being a patron.
This is who you need to follow, please. Let's get right to it. How old were you when you got into Star Trek, mate?
Probably about 8 years old. Actually, well, let me start by saying thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be here.
Yeah.
But I was probably about 8 years old when I first saw my first Star Trek episode. And I remember which one it was, too. It was an original series episode for The World is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky.
Right.
And-
Remind me of that premise.
Sure. So basically, there's a bunch of people on an asteroid, and they don't realize they're on an asteroid, and it's just speeding away. And they think it's like that's the whole world. But Kirk, Spock, and McCoy all go down there, and they tell them, actually, you're on this asteroid that's on a collision course for a planet, and they try to divert it, but there's a computer involved that's,
The
as
evil
with-
computer episode.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the many evil computer
One of the many
episodes
evil
in the original series of Star Trek. But I saw it when I was probably about 7 or 8 years old. It wasn't done. This was in reruns, of course, because I wasn't
No,
born
you're
when it.
probably that wouldn't have been. It would have been reruns for you. I mean, I don't want to give your age away, but
No, it's okay. I'm 52. It's fine.
God damn it! You're 52.
Yeah. Sorry.
That pisses me off. So that, and you just did you know in immediately that this
Yes.
this fodder was definitely for you?
I
at 8?
loved it.
And what
I
was it
loved
about it?
Well, I loved that there was a discovery aspect to it. I loved that these people didn't understand the world that was around them. I was already a big science fan in general, and I'd seen Star Wars and things like that, but this had this more discovery, understanding, this build throughout, as opposed to just fight and lasers and things like that.
Yeah.
So I love that aspect to it. So as soon as I was out of town when I saw the episode, as soon as I got home, found it on the local TV station and caught as much as I could from reruns. Then after that, I watched all the movies as they came out, Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock, etc. And every series that's come out since then, like as it aired, I watched every one. I have to say, I almost stopped after second season of Next
I was going to say
Generation.
probably Enterprise.
No, not Enterprise. I loved Enterprise. Actually, my son's favorite series is
Is that
Enterprise.
right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. What? Say that again.
I said my son's favorite
Adam.
series
God
is
bless you,
Enterprise.
Adam.
Yep, Adam
So
indeed.
that was his first introduction, was it? Did
We started with Voyager, and then we went
You
to
did.
Enterprise from there. Yeah.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Virginia, southeastern Virginia, Hampton.
Right.
Yeah. I was born in Australia, but then moved as an infant.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're actually an Aussie.
Yeah.
You'd never know, mate.
Yeah. No. given
Whereabouts
that
in Australia did you grow
I
up?
was born in Sydney, but I lived there for 3 months, so it wasn't very
Okay.
long at all.
So your parents ostensibly Australian? And,
Well, they were Egyptian citizens. They just happened to be living there. So my father was a professor as well. So he was there in Australia teaching at the University of New South Wales. He was an aerospace engineer. And then he moved over to George Washington University, and he was teaching remotely at the NASA Langley Research Campus. So
Right.
Yeah.
Whereabouts in Egypt did they come from?
Cairo. All my family besides my parents live in Cairo. My parents are actually still in the same house that I was in when I
Dusty
was
city.
4.
Are they still there?
It's everybody else. And my parents are still in Hampton, and all the rest of my relatives are still in Cairo.
Right.
Yeah.
I
All
was
the
just
living
talking
ones.
about. I went to Egypt. God, it must be nearly 40 years ago now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and stayed in Cairo for a bit before taking a cruise up that Nile.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a huge eclipse in 24, isn't there?
That's right.
Luxor's the place to go and see
That
it.
is the place to
Are
go.
you going to go?
I'm not going to go for that. No.
Me and my girl are thinking of going. So
We did a
You
cruise.
mean the one in Vegas?
no,
Luxor in
The
Vegas?
Luxor in Vegas.
I mean, it's only like an hour and a half flight.
Oh my goodness.
It'll be packed. Wait, there's another one?
do you go back to Egypt at all? or-
I've visited there a few times, especially growing up when I was living with my parents. We'd go every year, every other year, especially starting when they were naturalized citizens. So probably when I was about 7 is when we started going. And I went every year, every other year growing up. And then since then, it's more infrequent because, for me, it's more distant relatives. And,
Right.
and sadly, of course, as time goes by,
Do
a
you
lot of them
speak?
passed away. Yep.
Yeah, God
Yeah,
bless.
yeah.
Were mum and dad into Star Trek on account of the no?
No,
This was
really
This
not.
was a discovery.
Even after yours?
No, I mean they are amused by my love for it, and they are generous in their acceptance of that. But they don't partake so much themselves.
All right.
They're supportive. I'll give them that.
So then you got into coming to the conventions, right?
Yes.
And just as a fan, as it were, initially.
Yeah, so my first convention was 2014. So I have
quite
I have a
so.
daughter as well as my son. My daughter, well, actually, she says she's not a Star Trek fan, but she could name anything about any series and knows them all very well. But in 2014,
Sounds like a fan.
Yeah, right, exactly. In 2014, she suggested we go to Dragon Con because she was at the time a big Doctor Who fan and said, oh, there's going to be a lot of doctors there and there's a lot of Star Trek people because Patrick Stewart was going to be there and a lot of things. So she said, why don't we go to that? So that was my first convention
That's, you're
experience.
into the deep end at Dragon
That was
Con.
definitely jumping into the deep end.
That's
Yeah.
4 hotels. They lock down
5 now, yeah.
Is it 5
It's
now?
5 now, yeah.
What city is it? Is it not
Atlanta.
It's Atlanta,
Yeah,
isn't it?
you have like the hamster
Yeah.
tubes to go from hotel to hotel.
Exactly.
First one I went to, I remember just going from whatever hotel they put me in to go to the hotel where I was going to go sign out. And there was just a pack of anime girls in tartan miniskirts with their hair all, it was like, Oh my God, it's like I've landed on another planet. But I'm strangely, curiously.
It was a great experience, though. And
So that was 2014.
2014. It was a great experience. I loved seeing the panels. I loved just the fandom there and just being able to nerd out with a bunch of other nerds. But the thing that surprised me was how much science there was there. There was a lot of people giving science talks at Dragon Con.
Right.
So it was actually at that, or just after that, I reached out to our friend Garrett Wong, who actually runs the Trek track at Dragon Con.
He does, doesn't he?
Yeah. And I said, what would you think of my giving a talk about, say, evolution in the context of Star Trek? And he said, we're always looking for more science content.
Right.
So, yeah.
Because that's your forte, really, isn't it? You're a biology professor in the field of evolution and ecology.
Yeah, exactly. My degree's in ecology and evolution. My specialty is evolutionary genetics. Yeah.
Right.
Very good.
So I was thinking about this because I read *Sapiens*. I mean, is that basically the same page that you're on, or?
Well, so I mean, the way I study evolution in terms of my research laboratory is I guess classically what we've done is we've tried to understand what are the genetic changes it takes to make a new species.
Yeah.
Right. So, for example, like if we were to go, or generally speaking, if you think of species are essentially gene pools, like people who are individuals which can exchange genes with each other. So what keeps them from exchanging genes with other species? Some of that is mate preference. Like if we saw a chimpanzee, we're not physically attracted to it. It thinks we're weird hairless things too.
Right.
So what I use things like fruit flies to try to understand what is the genetic basis for this. Yeah, very good. Yeah, you've done your research.
He keeps getting told that. It's killing and it's not as though we don't get the same stuff.
I'm just faster on the draw than you.
Oh my God. I knew that. I knew that.
Fair.
Say it. It's Drosophila.
I just don't get a chance.
I dated her for a couple of weeks.
We did a play together.
So fruit flies are particularly good for this because they mutate quickly and you can introduce.
It's more they're small. You can have rapid generations, things like that. So what we want to do is we want to do a series of genetic crosses and forced matings. People don't like it when we do that. No, I'm just kidding. But with the fruit flies, you can pair whoever you want with whatever you want and try to understand what the genetic basis of any trait is. And the generation time's like 2 weeks. So it's very easy to work with.
Right.
Yeah.
You kill a lot of fruit flies.
Oh my gosh, I've committed fruit fly genocide.
Oh my God.
There's so many flies.
You name them?
Oh.
No, we
I never
do
even
that.
considered that. You're a
So where was
fly
your
mass
Millions
murderer.
of them.
Oh my God.
Millions are dead.
where was
He's laughing.
please donate to the Drosophila Fund.
Every fruit fly's life is important for research.
For reasons.
Drosophila life.
When did you first realize you were into science? Were you just a kid and you were like, this is my thing? Or was it later in life?
That's a great question. I honestly don't remember a first event for that. I just always remember growing up around science and really liking science. But I think since my father was an engineer, my mother, she pursued a graduate degree in engineering as well. I think STEM was always just in the ethos that I was in.
Yeah.
And I loved astronomy as a kid. I remember when I was in 4th grade, I said I wanted to be an astronomer. And then as I started taking biology, I was like, oh, this is even cooler.
Oh, cool.
But I mean, for me, it really solidified in college. I had
Never a fireman.
no, that never came out to me. I had a great professor in college. His name was Professor Bruce Grant, who actually I'm still very much in touch with. I graduated over 30 years ago. He literally wrote me today saying, good luck on the shuttle launch.
Oh, that's
That's
great.
so sweet.
He's phenomenal. But I took his
Can
class.
we get him?
Yeah. You'd be great. I took his class and I just was captivated. I used to sit in the front row and just listening, and I would record it with my little tape recorder. And then when I go out to work out in the gym, I just wanted to listen to it again because it was just fascinating. Wow. Yeah, this is
work out
specific
too,
for
bro?
evolutionary genetics. Pardon me?
You work out too?
Oh, yeah.
Wait, let me get this straight.
I
You
don't.
would go to class, record it, and then listen to it again when you were working out?
That is correct. Nerd.
Barely finished high school.
That's not true.
Hey, he did.
I did.
He did finish high school. We're
Did
all
he know
very
you
proud of
recorded
you.
it?
Oh, yeah.
Some sort of.
Oh, we're allowed to. That's
Oh,
not,
you
that's
were
not
allowed to,
uncomfortable.
okay.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
where was your first panel then that might have got you noticed? Is that Dragon Con?
Dragon Con, yeah,
and then,
2016.
And then how did it tumble from that? What was?
Yeah, so 2016, I gave that panel at Dragon Con. Right around the same time, it was really funny. I was approached by Princeton University Press, a writer there, a publisher there, saying, we would like you to give a public talk and write a book associated with this public talk. And what I said is, well, the public talk I give the most often, which was true up until that point, was this general why evolution is true, because it's, especially where we live in the South, there's a lot of skepticism for evolution. The problem is there's a book that's really well done. It was written by my PhD advisor, called Why Evolution is True. I was like, I can't top that book. I mean, it's really good. It's the state of the art, and it was fairly current. She said, well, are there any other public talks you've given recently? Hence the connection to Dragon Con. I said, well, there is one. It's a little out there.
No pun intended.
Yeah.
Is that what
Yes, that's it.
it resolved in
This
Live
is
Long and Evolve?
Exactly. So that was Live Long and Evolve, what Star Trek can teach us about evolution, genetics, and life on other worlds. So I did finish the book, and I gave a talk at Princeton University about it. It was fascinating giving a talk at Princeton about it, because there were these super experts in evolution. Peter and Rosemary Grant were famous for doing these Darwin's Finch studies, and there were people out there who believed.
The Beak of the Finch.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
It's an extraordinary book.
Yeah, right. And in the same audience, there were people who believed aliens are real and are there around us. Things like that. Was a very diverse audience in terms of.
You had some balance there.
Yeah. But that was great, and it was a great opportunity. The book. Oops.
We want everyone to see it.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Mark Cartier, ladies and gentlemen. Mark Cartier.
The best side of him.
Yeah.
The book was really fun because essentially what it is the introductory. So at Duke, we have an introductory biology sequence. There's a molecular biology seminar, or a molecular biology class, and then a class called Genetics and Evolution. This basically is all the content of the class on genetics and evolution, just slightly simpler in presentation and all framed using examples from Star Trek, including a lot from Enterprise.
Wow. Okay.
And how was that received? How has it been received?
I mean, it's sold copies. I think fans like it a lot. I don't know that it's gotten, it's never been a bestseller. I don't know that it ever will be a bestseller or anything like that. But I get residual checks, so I'm guessing it's going okay.
Have the students
yeah.
responded?
So I have used it in the classroom. So I teach a non-majors class. Literally, that would show up on your transcript as Genetics, Evolution, Star Trek. We use this.
Cool.
You use it as a template, don't you?
We do. We use it as a textbook. And we'll actually watch like a piece of one of your episodes or somebody else's episode and then discuss the science depicted there. And what's great is it doesn't matter if the science is right or wrong, because what we do is we discuss what is right about it, what may not be exactly accurate, and what would make it better. And they love it. Even people who've never seen any Star Trek before would say, hey, I love just having a narrative instead of just memorizing the Krebs cycle or whatever. They have something that they can tie to. Like, oh, I remember when, Trip was cloned as Sim, and that's similar to X, Y, or Z. So
what other episodes in our show would fit into that?
I can tell you which ones are actually.
Did you bring the augments in and with Brent?
A little bit. They're referenced, but I didn't have a lot about it in there. But actually, I specifically asked to have an episode index because I figured every fan is going to say like,
I noticed that.
So actually, I could read the list here, but it's probably about 25 episodes there. So.
All from
Enterprise.
No shit.
Yeah. Take a look.
Dom, they're mostly my episodes.
Well, actually, what's interesting is
I just blew shit up. Didn't I?
What's interesting about Enterprise in particular is Star Trek always reflects the knowledge of science at the time. So if you go back to original series of Star Trek, there's almost no reference to DNA or genetics or anything like that. If you go to Next Generation, there's a little bit more. So you go to Voyager, there's a significant step up. But if you think of the time of Voyager, that's when the Human Genome Project was in full swing, right? You all came and had your series right after the Human Genome Project had been published. So there was a lot there. Actually, the word genomics is in something like 10% of the episodes of Enterprise.
No kidding.
Really? Or genome or genomics.
Right.
So,
wow.
Yeah. So it always reflects the science of the time. And so that's why there was so much from Enterprise, even though it was a shorter series, that there was a ton of content to draw from there, which is great.
Wow.
And so then you started doing panels at conventions, and then at some point, someone calls you, Dr. Erin McDonald, perhaps?
So interestingly, Dr. Erin McDonald and I were giving panels together before either of us had anything to do with the actual series.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, we were just giving, because she was also going to Dragon Con regularly and she was also giving talks. So we would sometimes pair up even on a talk. This actually started with a talk about science in Star Trek Discovery. And we were just talking about the science in the first two series. And there were three people in the back of the room, Ken Mitchell, Mary Chifo, and Jane Brooke. And they actually asked a question, and I forget, Ken asked a funny question about like, why does he sweat so much in his suit or something like that. But afterwards, from the introduction, Jane said, oh, you went to Duke. I went to Duke, or you work at Duke. I went to Duke.
Oh,
so she came up to me and said, "Hey, I went to Duke University. We got to be friends. We chatted a lot." So I asked her, "Is there any possibility of getting to help out with some of the science in the series?" So she very graciously connected me with Erica Lippold, who connected me with Michelle Paradise, who's the showrunner for Star Trek Discovery.
This was Discovery, right?
Yeah.
And she was an actress, Jane.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
She played Admiral Cornwell in the first two seasons.
Right.
Dr. Erin McDonald, at the same time, she actually had been connecting with Boyan Kim, who's also one of the writers there. And I think that was who brought her into the series as well. So we actually came through different routes. But then it was great. The first call I had with Michelle Paradise, she said, well, we want to pair you with a physicist to work on this thing about the science of the burn, which is a plot in season 3 of Discovery. And I said, oh, who's the physicist? She said, well, her name is Dr. Erin McDonald. And I just laughed because
I know her.
Yeah, exactly. We know her. I know her very well. I have her cell phone number here. We talk all the time.
Oh, wow.
So that was wonderful getting to work.
Do you do anything with, Ken has ALS?
Yeah.
And is that part of the work that you do with genetics?
No, it's not. I don't do anything with humans. Everything I do is with the fruit flies, unfortunately. Yeah.
Well, I understand that, but or with the work with the fruit flies, what is the goal to the mutations and all that?
No, there are connections from a lot of basic research to applications like ALS. For the work I do, it's very loosely connected to it. It wouldn't go to anything with regard to ALS for me personally. No. Now, I should note, too, we were talking about Dr. Erin McDonald. I should note, so she initially was just a contracted person like me for season 3 of Discovery, but she is now on staff as the science advisor for the whole Star Trek franchise. So she's actually essentially employed by them in that sort of sense. So I like to say she's the sheriff of science in Star Trek, and I'm somebody who's occasionally deputized.
Before you guys, were they using any scientists in the legacy shows? Or
certainly.
They
certainly.
were?
Yeah, certainly. So Andre Bormanis was the science advisor through all of Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and then I think he was on writing
became a
staff for
writer.
Enterprise.
I didn't
Exactly.
know that's how he became a writer.
I
Andre?
think he worked for NASA before.
It's possible.
He was a good writer. We put that in the notes. We need to try and get Andre on.
He's great. He actually
time.
spoke to my class too about consulting on Star Trek. I'm sorry.
He's a lovely man too.
Yeah.
He's and I did not know that. So he was a scientist initially and then became a writer.
Would you
Because
ever?
then he went on to work with. I was just thinking, Brannon. That show he did. Brannon did.
The Orville.
Yeah.
The reboot of Carl Sagan's show.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
Andre
that's right.
was heavily involved in that. Yeah.
Also Orville too. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
Would you ever jump ship from education to doing something?
I love
like that.
I love teaching.
Yeah.
I love doing the research, and honestly, I'm always scared because Star Trek went away for a long time.
I know what you're talking about. That was a scary moment in time when there was no
That brings
Star
us swiftly to we're on strike at the moment.
Trek. Oh,
And,
yes. The
SAG
strike.
after strong.
Yeah.
God bless. It's going to be a tough period of time here, but we've looked into all this and we've taken a lot of advice from SAG, and apparently we're in the clear at the moment. So
Yeah.
I'm not a SAG member.
We're not scabbing.
We're not crossing
We're not
lines. of
scabbing yet.
and nor would we.
Nor would
No,
we.
definitely
So I know that you wrote a paper. Rapid genetic and developmental morphological change following extreme celerity. Now, I've read this paper twice,
Clearly been
Doctor,
practicing that all morning.
and I have one question for you. How do you like your celerity cooked?
I love it.
Parred or boiled?
Yeah.
So
I should
tell
give
me
the
about-
story on this. Yeah.
Anyways,
So to be clear, I'm not an author on this paper formally. So let me give a little bit of context. So typically speaking, for the science I do on, say, fruit flies, I will conduct the experiments. I'll write up the paper. I'll write up a paper describing the results. We'll submit it to a reputable scientific journal, and it'll come out, and that's how the scientific community gets to see it. And before it comes out, there's a review process where it's very carefully looked over by some other people, and they say, well, you didn't test this. I'm skeptical of this conclusion, et cetera, et cetera. Starting about 20 years or so ago, a series of things that are referred to as predatory scientific journals came on the scene. And essentially what they do is you send them anything, you pay a little bit of money, and they just put
It's
it out
fantasy
there.
publishing,
Yeah,
really,
it's
isn't it?
basically
Yeah,
fantasy
yeah.
publishing. Yeah, and they just put it online, and it's pay to play.
Right.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So somebody
I might have some papers to publish.
Yeah.
That's
About the science of my
the bullshit
awesomeness.
paper he wrote.
There you go. So
And,
somebody, I don't know who, wrote a paper that essentially recounts all the scenes in the infamous Star Trek Voyager episode Threshold,
Oh,
but all using
excellent.
science speak. And the authors of the paper, if you read the paper, the authors of the paper are Thomas Paris,
That's
Harry
right,
Kim.
that's the-
I've
Milana
read a lot
Torres.
of your work, and this looks like
Bogus.
like your work.
This looks like
Looks
your work.
a lot like your work.
That's Dr. Mohammed's work.
Yeah. We'll talk later.
That's some
about
meta
it.
troll play right there.
But anyway, if
So-
anybody wants to read about, like,
so
if you
now,
just
why
Google,
did you choose Threshold as the episode to sort of write this bogus paper on?
it's so infamous. It's so. I mean,
is, right?
it's as some people have described it. It's a Brandon Braga fever dream. In the sense of- nothing against him, but
Oh my God.
I
I've heard people call it that.
I gotta get that T-shirt.
Yeah.
I'm in a Brandon Braga fever dream. Sorry,
But I
B.
mean, the acting is great, things like that. But just what happens is just so completely absurd, especially in the latter half of the episode.
Well, yeah. Do you know? I mean, I didn't know much about this episode, but so Tom, Robbie Duncan McNeil, is in the shuttle pod, and he's trying to crank it to warp 10. And somewhere in the going to warp 10, he becomes a slug,
Salamander.
a salamander.
Yeah.
Thank you. To use
Tomato,
the
tomato.
To use the to use the technical term. And then he gets. Does he go back to the ship and he gets Janeway to become a salamander too?
Yeah, well, it's before he changes all the way, he takes Janeway with him, and then they complete the process of becoming salamanders, and then they have 3 salamander babies.
I mean, it's a Brandon Braga fever dream.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So this is what this paper is.
Exactly.
I refer you again to your celerity, sir.
Well, what's great about this paper too is that this came out in 2018. It actually got a little bit of buzz. If you just Google fake Voyager paper, you see all sorts of like funny press releases about it. But in the series Lower Decks, there's an episode called "We'll Always Have Tom Paris."
Oh yes.
Ah, you know where I'm
I know
going.
where you're
So
going.
there's a comment said where Boimler is saying, "Oh, Tom Paris is coming to the ship," and Mariner says, "Is he still a salamander?"
Yes.
And she says, "No, that was a celerity-induced increase in morphological." That's basically the title of the paper.
Nailed it.
Oh my God.
So it went from like TV to fake science back to TV.
Brilliant.
Nerds
Well, what
make
was your
shows.
response to this paper?
Well, it was interesting. So whoever submitted it, I didn't say it was me, because that would be scientific misconduct.
Yeah. Right.
Oh,
Whoever
Mohammed.
submitted it.
You heard it first here, people.
Sent it to this particular journal and actually did get feedback, but it was all just about typos and things like that. Not about the fact that these people are changed into salamanders and grow extra hearts and have kids and all the rest of it was not there. They clearly just didn't get past the jargon, because I made it a little heavily jargon filled, but it's accurate. It's true to the show. If you follow the results section, it's basically scene by scene what happens in the episode,
Wow.
Hilarious.
but in science speak.
I actually am really very interested in reading this now.
You're welcome to
I
that
am
copy. Eventually, the journal took it offline because it got enough publicity. They're like, "Oh yeah, no, we don't."
Really?
Is that journal
We're
still
not
around?
that fake.
Oh, the journal's still around.
No shit.
It actually came out in another journal, which I think might still have it online too. So if you just Google the title, you might still be able to find it.
Unbelievable. It probably got a good click up, didn't it?
Yeah.
No kidding.
Actually, the paper's been cited a few times, but in the context of understanding these predatory scientific journals, not because of the results specifically.
Has anyone of this team written any more of these kinds of?
There might be another one about the spore drive in Star Trek Discovery if you dig around.
There might be. There might
might
be.
be.
There might be. I've heard rumor.
Are you coming to Vegas?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding.
No, I'm giving 2 talks in Vegas. One I don't actually. One's a panel with somebody else, which I don't know all the details on. But one I know I'm doing is biology and science consulting in Star Trek Discovery, where I go over all 4 seasons. So I had nothing to do with the first 2 seasons, but I'll still talk about some of the science in there and how is it reflected in general and in real life, and how accurate is the show. And then the last 2 seasons are pieces that I did work a little bit on.
So
Together with Dr. McDonald.
because I don't know Discovery particularly, but you were particularly involved in the tardigrade sort of.
No, that was earlier.
Oh, was that
The
earlier?
tardigrade story is actually very interesting, though. So I'm glad you brought that
Right.
up. So one of the things in there that they have is this space tardigrade, and tardigrades are kind of famous that they can survive the vacuum of space. That's been a little bit overstated in general, though. People make it sound like you could just have tardigrades floating around in space. There was a study done.
Well, no, I mean, okay. I mean, to the layman, what is a tardigrade? Is it a
Oh, yeah.
microscopic?
It is. Oh, good
Yeah.
call. Yeah. So it is microscopic. It's called a water bear. They're small things. They have 6 legs. They're very stumpy. And They swim around in sort of in like little droplets of water on mosses outside. They're very cute if you just Google them.
And are they found in? We haven't found them in outer space, have we?
Well, they've been taken to outer space to like by the European Space Agency to the space station to study
And they
because they
sort
can
of-
dry up and then
And
be,
sit in stasis. That's
exactly.
Right.
So there was a study done. This is what people cite in saying they can live in outer space. There was a study done where they took some out there and they actually exposed it to the vacuum and radiation of space. And it's true that not all of them died, but they had multiple species For one species, there were 3 individuals that survived out of like 100 that were studied for just a couple of hours. So it's not like they just are okay in space. But, so it's a little bit overstated.
Didn't we just crash a bunch of them?
That's what's come up before. Good
Yeah,
knowledge. Yeah. So a bunch crashed on the moon, and everybody said, I wonder if they're still alive. Like, yeah, they're not alive.
They're not alive.
No, I'm sure they're dead. I'm very confident those are dead.
They're not planning their...
Yeah.
The next time we go
The
to
next
the moon,
tardigrade takeover, yeah.
the place will be
The
crawling
great
with
tardigrade
tardigrades.
Right. There's another great thing about tardigrades, too, that
Mind the tardigrades when you go to the moon.
Much like taking the weasel to New Zealand or whatever it was. What was that?
Oh, the bunny to Australia?
Yeah.
So also in season 1, though, they mentioned there was a passing comment about, like its microscopic cousins on Earth, the tardigrade acquires a lot of its genome by horizontal gene transfer. That's something that Michael Burnham said.
Yeah.
So horizontal gene transfer is literally just like a gene coming out of one individual and going into another individual and not their descendant. So if I was to give you one of my genes, that would be a horizontal gene transfer. Bacteria do this all the time. They trade genes. It's much less common for big things. But what was fascinating about that is the first genome of the tardigrade was published in 2015. And they said that they thought that a lot of its genome had been acquired by horizontal gene transfer. And that was just 2 years before Discovery came out. So I'm assuming they pulled that from the press release. So kudos to them. Unfortunately.
Oh no.
Yeah. Unfortunately, as with much science, it was wrong.
not
2 years
factual.
later.
It was an incorrect interpretation. It was not
jumped
that
the shark a bit.
They jumped to conclusions a
you.
little bit.
I like to pet them.
But I didn't have anything to do with the tardigrade part of the discovery.
If you can even get to it to pet it.
You
Without
really
breaking
wanted
your
to
foot.
pet it. Like they were.
Yeah, they
nuts.
said, who wants to touch a shark? And I was like, I want to.
I would too. Hey, I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
And it was actually smooth and not scaly and rough. It was,
The smooth
You
guy.
remember which kind it is? Was it like a hammerhead or something?
It was a
No,
snake shark.
I don't know what kind. It wasn't one of those sleek sharks, but it had like a larger head and a smaller, thin body.
Okay.
They weren't going to need a bigger boat.
Oh, okay.
They were not. But they put it back into the ocean.
No, but I came in season
Wait, did
3.
they drag it out of the ocean?
No, they were fishing.
Oh, they're fishing. So they technically did drag it out of the ocean. Yeah. Okay.
At night, apparently.
Yeah.
And then, so what about species 10? And
10C.
And this is like an augment species that you dreamt up. Is that-
Well, so species 10C, this was a big part of season 4 for Star Trek Discovery. So that was a great part that I got to have a little part in. Essentially, what they said is they wanted to have a truly alien from day one. So this is what the writers put out there. They said we don't want to be a humanoid with a prosthetic. But I said that actually in one panel, and John Billingsley was in the back, and he said, "There's nothing wrong with humanoids with prosthetics." Fair enough. I love the humanoids with prosthetics. But anyway, they wanted truly alien aliens, and they wanted to have a process for understanding how these communicate. They didn't want just to be something where they pull out the universal translator and now they're speaking to it. So they brought me in on this and they said, can you work with us on this? So I went back and forth and we actually landed in the end on chemical communication rather than,
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, which is common in the animal kingdom. It's just we don't do that so much ourselves. So for us, it's a little bit unfamiliar, but there's tons of precedent for it. I mean, ants use it all the time, dogs use it all the time. There's a lot of chemical communication out there. So then it wasn't just the word, but we then had to work out with VFX, what would this look like? So I suggested using what are called hydrocarbons. So these are basically just molecules that have both carbon and hydrogen, as you would infer from the name hydrocarbon. But what's great about carbon is from its position on the periodic table, it can bind to up to 4 other elements, whereas most elements can't do that many. So you can actually come up with very complicated structures for it. So if you want to have very complicated, say, word characters, you could do that with hydrocarbons. And they're used by insects in communication.
All right.
So
wild.
Interesting way to use your profession.
yeah, right?
and also marry it to entertainment
Yeah.
and what, the environment that you find yourself in. It must be super exciting.
Oh, I can't even begin to describe how exciting it is. And what an honor and a privilege to get to contribute a little bit to this. And what I love is that the writers and showrunners and VFX people, they're so excited about science. They want this to be good because they know, and as I'm sure you all know, how many scientists and engineers are inspired by these shows. Right?
Well, that's a question I haven't asked you. Was Star Trek part of your journey into science, or were you probably already there? Or
I would say that they were mutually reinforcing.
mutually reinforcing?
Yeah, that by virtue of being liking science, I appreciated Star Trek. By virtue of liking Star Trek and liking other people who liked Star Trek, that reinforced my love of science. That undergrad professor I mentioned before, who wrote me this morning, he was a big Star Trek fan. So we'd always talk about Star Trek when I was a student with him. And
it's a
we still
recurring
do.
theme for us when we go to the con,
Yeah.
and the people that come up to our table. And
Yeah, but I mentioned all of those. They're so excited about it. What the funniest thing is, I remember one of them said, "Your job is so cool." I was like, "You've got to be kidding me! You write Star Trek." I mean, like, you couldn't
job
get
is
much
so
cooler
cool.
than that,
Right.
But no,
Did
it's
you
been
ever get invited to a writer's room or?
I've been on some Zoom writers' room. I've never gone physically in person
Oh,
to
cool.
do that. But yeah.
Yep.
So I've worked mostly with Discovery with seasons 3 and 4, and I have things that haven't come out yet with Strange New Worlds and Prodigy.
Oh, very cool.
Have you ever thought of putting pen to paper and writing an episode?
I don't feel like that's within my skill set. I'm good at working with somebody else's idea and editing, that sort of thing. But coming up with some truly creative thing, I feel like they're much better at it than I would be.
Have you? Is there a difference in terms of what science, what the show got right regarding science, and like the legacy Trek versus the newer stuff?
Oh, that's a good question.
yeah, did they improve, as it were?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to pat myself on the back and say like, well, yeah, I made it a lot better.
We do it a lot.
I would say that all of Star Trek tries. Even if you go back to the original series, when I don't know that they had, maybe they had somebody doing a little bit of science advising, but I mean, you could tell that for everything, even the original series, you could tell at least sometimes they must have consulted somebody because some of the things that they say, like, that's unusually specific and exactly right. So
Really?
yeah. Yeah. Every now and then it's not, but
Well, sure.
and what will always happen is story will always trump science, right? That'll always be the case. That if person X has to go from place A to place B and it has to be in a means that would never work because they would die anyway, it's going to happen anyway.
Well, it's also one of the great conversations you can then have about an episode. It's like,
bingo. That's
my
exactly
brother
it.
and his friends would walk around the perimeter of the playground in elementary school and talk about the previous day's episode.
Yes.
On a rerun like we all watched, and I'm sure would have these stirring arguments about what could have been and what would never be.
Oh yeah, that's actually the most intimidating thing about consulting is because I'm terrified that I would get something wrong because
and
there'll
then
be
everyone will call you out for the
oh
rest
my gosh,
of
I'll
your
be called
life.
out like, oh, that PhD guy, he's such a fake.
Yeah.
Dr. Noor is full of crap.
Yeah, exactly.
Season 18, episode 5.
So in that regard, what I do is when I'm doing some of the research for the writers, I will actually cite literature citations from the primary scientific papers just to back it up. So both to keep myself honest, but also to give them something that if somebody says, well, actually, it's like, well, I'll actually be back. Look at the 2022 paper by so-and-so.
Right. Do you still teach the same course that
I'm planning to teach it this spring.
awesome.
I love it. It's so much fun.
And it's full of students who are
It's a small class, but it's always full. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
You're at Duke, aren't you?
I am Duke University. Yeah.
So I wonder also being at Duke in that part of the country and creation versus evolution versus
What is
agnostic.
that? Durham, North Carolina, right?
Yeah.
Very good. Very good.
How does that all sort of
At Duke, I've never had any pushback
haven't.
on campus because I mean the people who are there are they're so well steeped in their education and things like
Right.
that. So I haven't had any pushback there. So prior to being at Duke, I taught.
What are you saying?
Prior to being at Duke, prior to coming to Duke, though, I taught at Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge.
Further down.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Much bigger school too, and things like that. So there, I remember there was a class I taught that was a non-majors class, and there would occasionally be some people there who were uncomfortable. I'll say that.
Really?
Say the least. But I would always have a conversation with them and say, look, I'm not saying anything about the existence of God or anything like that. I'm just telling you about this is how processes of evolution happen on Earth. I'm just talking about it. And things like natural selection, although people will say something like, oh, that's just a theory. It's mathematically inevitable.
the beak of the finch?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a great demonstration. But if you think about it, even from the genic level, and we actually understand this, or just the public understands this so much better now in the case of COVID, if you have three conditions met, you will always have natural selection. If you have variation, if that variation is heritable, and if it affects survival or reproduction.
Right.
This is exactly what we've seen with the COVID variants as an example. Like where there was, Delta and then Omicron came around. So there's your variation. It's heritable because Omicron begets Omicron, Delta begets Delta. Omicron reproduced faster. What happened? We had natural selection and boom, Omicron blew up.
Right.
That's just natural selection. It's not a theory in the sense that people are skeptical about it.
Luckily, the symptoms of Omicron, they deplete. Is that
right.
a natural order of things when you extend the life of something like that it becomes less threatening? Does it
That does happen.
Does it know that to become less threatening because it's for its own survival, that you don't kill all the hosts?
It's true that if it immediately killed something, then that would be very hard to pass on.
Yeah.
That's true. But for example, the difference between Delta and Omicron, my guess is that's probably just luck.
It was just luck.
That's my guess, yeah.
We got lucky this time.
Yeah.
Is there? Can you be a creationist and work in your field?
I totally think so. And in fact, there are some. I mean, if you, Francis Collins, who was the former director of the National Institutes of Health, was both a creationist and he very much accepted the truth of evolution.
Wow.
Yeah.
How does that?
Yeah, they're not mutually exclusive, I don't think. Yeah.
I don't know how they're mutual.
Well, a little bit.
Oh, I mean, sure. Okay.
What do you say, Mark?
There's a given circumstance here that you have to accept or not.
I mean, evolution is a very real thing that we can witness day to day. Like things are changing in front of our eyes. So clearly it's happening. It doesn't necessarily negate the potential that we were all created.
Yeah, the piece that people have the hardest time with is this idea of common ancestry. That all life, and this is one of the most fascinating things about evolution, is that all life on Earth is related and actually related. Like we are actually related to blades of grass.
And
like if you go far enough back
down to like there's a tribe or a woman in Africa that apparently we all come from.
Oh, Susie or...
Are you talking about Lucy?
Lucy, that's it.
Yeah. I mean, within humans, I don't think there's much controversy on that, even in the general public. I think people largely accept that. It's this truth that there's common ancestry universally with all life. That's what some people then get very uncomfortable with. Like, what do you mean? I'm not related to dogs. I'm not related to grass.
Oh, I would love to be related to dogs.
We all come from stardust.
Yeah.
At the end of the day,
We do.
it's the same atomic energy, as it were, that created... We were watching there's a show that's just started on Netflix last night. What's it called?
About the Homo naledi.
Yeah, it's about the Homo
Naledi.
Nadali, which is a offshoot of before just before Sapiens, that were clearly advanced. They may not have had language, but they were certainly performing burial rituals.
Yeah. And our cousins Neanderthal. I mean, which apparently we interbred with within the past couple of 100,000 years.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, we all have a little bit of Neanderthal ancestry.
Right. Yeah.
So it's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
We're not used to seeing multiple hominids in one place.
Right.
I mean,
So there's actually an Enterprise episode where that was the case.
Which one was that then?
I don't remember the name of it.
Shame me, don't you?
It was one where there was one species that was very sick, and there was another that seemed more primitive, but it actually was not getting sick. And there was this ethical conundrum that Archer had to decide whether to help the sick ones or not. And Phlox was saying, like, no, you should give them the opportunity. You should not save them so you give the other one the opportunity to maybe expand. Right. And he made a great point saying, like, what if somebody had come and give them the Neanderthals an evolutionary advantage? Then we wouldn't have existed.
Right.
So, yeah, it's a fascinating topic.
Wow.
Yeah, all of Star Trek is great with these ethical conundrums connected to science. I love that.
Do you think there's anything like Star Trek in science fiction that attempts that?
For the ethical conundrum specifically?
Yeah, or even addressing the science element of it.
Well, certainly there's a lot of science, especially when you look at physics, which is not my field. There's a lot of TV shows out there or movies that are very, very good, and they clearly employ a lot of science advisors to get that right. It's less common for the biology side. I mean, unless it's actually like a medical show or things like that. Those, of course, will hire a medical consultant to it. I can't think of one that I've seen that's as good at Star Trek in terms of the biology in general.
Thank God.
What other
But
shows?
I don't watch that many, so.
Right.
What shows employ the physicists so much? I'm trying to think what.
Yeah, The Expanse, definitely.
Okay.
They get it very well. And of course, the famous movie, The Martian, that was very good in terms of looking at the physics there. A little bit of biology, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did enjoy that film, I have to say.
Potatoes.
Yeah. Grown in poop. Poop and Martian dust.
That's one of your favorite movies.
What?
The Martian?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I watch it to go to sleep.
Speaking of which,
It's amazing. It's so comforting,
the guy that wrote that book, and I forget his name, he sort of self-published that, didn't he?
Oh, is that right? I didn't know the history.
I don't think
I forget his name, but I believe that's true.
Wow.
Yeah, and it just was a runaway hit.
Yeah.
Are your kids following in your footsteps?
So my daughter is just finishing law school.
Okay.
So a little bit different in
A
that
little
sense. So she's in Berkeley now.
Well,
in
she
her
can
last
represent that paper.
year. Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Represent me when finds out.
Whoever wrote it.
Whoever wrote it. Exactly. Well done. My son actually he's a major in computer science
there you
at
go.
North Carolina State.
Oh, very
That's
cool.
Adam, right?
That's Adam.
Who we met as a young kid.
That's
in
right. 2016.
2016, the 50th anniversary.
Yeah.
Is he coming this Vegas?
He's not coming to Vegas this time. Yeah.
So, Mohamed, what are you working on now?
Research-wise?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I couldn't tell you about the other one, about the Star Trek stuff. Research-wise, let me tell you an interesting story. most people, and actually most of any kind of animal out there, most people have at least one gene variant that causes death before adulthood. Like probably most of us here in this room have a gene variant that causes death before adulthood.
We made it.
Yeah, we made it.
Oh, so we beat it. We're all winners.
Well, so the key is that we have one, but we have two copies of all our genes, right? We have one that we got from our mom, one that we got from our dad for just about every gene. But what's interesting is like, why are there so many of these broken death variants out there? Right. So this is actually what I'm studying.
Broken death variant meaning?
Well, broken in the sense that there's a gene that's been broken through some sort of mutation that if you were to have two copies of it, you would not survive to adulthood.
A break.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to understand is why those are so abundant. But we're not doing it with humans because, again, the controlled mating things don't go over well when we try doing that. So we're doing this with fruit flies. So
flies in the bathroom?
Flies, yep, some of the flies from the bathroom, not those.
I told you. I was
Fruit flies,
there was
not
one
house
hiding
flies.
in there. I said, what are you doing? He's like, I'm hiding from Dr. Noor.
I don't blame
And you were like,
But I caught like hundreds of flies from my backyard, and we've brought them into the lab, and we've identified about half of them have one of these variants on a particular chromosome we're studying. We're trying to see what are these death variants, right? And why are they so abundant? So there's two possible explanations for why they're so abundant. One is just that they have so many genes. They have, almost as many genes as we do. They have just so many genes, and that a lot of them are essential that if they happen to break, that will kill them. And maybe there's just that many fragile genes and that many mutations. That's one explanation. The other explanation is that maybe sometimes there's actually an advantage to having one broken copy. And there's a well-known example of this in humans, which is sickle cell anemia.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right.
Right? So if you have two of the broken variants, you have sickle cell anemia, which is obviously very bad. If you have one broken variant, you actually don't have the disease, but you have a weird advantage that you're actually resistant to malaria. So if you, I know, right? It's crazy.
Totally makes sense.
This is for humans, not for flies. Yeah. So in countries where malaria is very abundant, you tend to see high incidence of sickle cell because of that, right? Because there's an advantage to having this copy. So that's one example, but we don't know of that many examples like that. So I thought, well, let's take the flies, let's study hundreds of these and see if there's a lot like that or if that's more the exception than the rule. And there's a couple of applications for this. So the general explanation is this is probably part of what explains why inbreeding is bad, not in a social sense, but in terms of if I was to have kids with my sister, I don't have a sister, but if I was to have kids with my sister, we probably have the same broken gene variants. We put them together in the kid and boom, the kid's dead.
Hence Europe's monarchy.
Hence Europe's monarchy or anything from Game of Thrones.
Right.
All right.
The more direct.
She only passed away a few months ago. God, Lord.
Poor Dominic.
Not the queen. She was clearly okay, or was okay.
And she was quite old.
She was quite old. The other thing is that sometimes you actually identify gene variants that are very important that you don't know about. So one of the ones that's come up already that we've been studying, we look to see what's the human homolog. Homolog means like the same kind of gene in us. And the one that we found was actually the most common cause for childhood kidney cancer in humans.
Well, I was
it's one of the ones that came up in the flies.
How?
Like,
no kidding. So are cancers what you would call this death gene? Is that something?
It could be. It could be. Yeah. So cancer is just an uncontrolled cellular division. Like it just keeps dividing and dividing. And it could be that if one of these particular genes regulates how often your cell's supposed to divide, it's supposed to make it stop, and then you break it, then you get this uncontrolled cell growth. So that is one possible outcome.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. How long does, maybe they're different lengths. How long does a study take to
years
produce
and years.
a paper?
That's a great question. So I had the idea for the study in 2017. Actually came from a great conversation with a fantastic student. Where this is something that people had been studying a lot from like the 1930s to the 1970s or 80s, and then they just kind of stopped. And part of the issue was they didn't really have a way of answering it because it's not if you go back to the 1960s, people hadn't even sequenced DNA yet. So understanding what are these breaks, and it was just all hypothetical.
Right.
But they kind of just dropped this. Yeah. So in talking with my student about some of this historical work, I said, hey, we could actually just do this now. We could actually solve this because now you can get, a genome for $1,000 or for a human genome or even much less for a fly genome because they have slightly smaller genomes than we do.
Right.
So I said, well, let's just do this. So this was 2017. It was conceived. We started the project in 2018. We got funding for it in 2020 because often getting money from the National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health takes a few tries. But they were very generous. They gave us about $1 million to do this. So we've been working on it now. It's probably going to take a couple more years still. So, the overall study, we're probably looking at maybe 6 or 7 years.
How many studies have you done in your career?
I mean, not all of them are that comprehensive. This is one of the largest I've ever done. I mean, in terms of publications, not including this kind.
That's you.
That's not me. Not including that kind. I mean, I've published a little bit over 100 research papers, but I mean, I say that like I wrote them. But I mean, a lot of these are collaborative with other research teams, or collaborative with my students or trainees, or et cetera. But yeah, I mean, typical projects last multiple years. It's very rare that a project is just a few months, unless you're just having a very small piece to somebody else's project.
And then the peer review is lengthy and...
It's not too bad. Well, it varies by discipline. So I've heard in economics, it sometimes takes like 2 years.
Have you got to a white paper stage with what you're doing at the moment, or?
So mine doesn't need that sort of thing. There are studies that need this sort of white papers. Mine, we just send in the proposal directly to the funding agency, and they assess it, and it comes back. A white paper is more like a big community-wide project, or multiple people working together on. They just want to put out an idea for we could do this sort of thing, and then after that, then you might approach funding on it.
Do you think that you're onto something?
It's early. Well, it's harsh to say it's early days when we're 6 years in.
Well, again, like we're talking about like timelines that are different from different professions and studies.
Yeah, it works. It's working really well. I mean, I feel like the process of identifying what the mutations are has been going much better than honestly I anticipated. So that's been great. The part about trying to figure out what are the evolutionary causes, like is it one of the two hypotheses I mentioned, that might be more challenging.
Yeah, that's got to be hard. I mean,
a lot of statistics.
Down?
Yeah, a lot of statistics.
How hard can it be? Science.
It's really fun. I mean, this is actually one of the things I love the most about my job. I mean, the problem is I say this about a lot of pieces of my job, but one of the things I love the most about my job is sitting with students and just brainstorming, saying we have a problem. How can we do this? And we sit there and we sketch out these possible things. And honestly, it's actually not that different from consulting. That often you're presented with a problem, and you sit down with another different group of brilliant people, and you sketch out how could this work. And it's honestly the type of thinking is fairly similar. Well, it's part of what I love about
communal.
Yeah, it's communal, exactly. And that's what I love about teaching. Again, like you sit there and we discuss things that are out there. And sometimes students will tell me something that I never thought of that. I need to go back and look that up. It seems like a basic question, but somehow it just had never crossed my mind.
What level of student are you teaching? Are you teaching, people going for a BS or an MS or a PhD?
Everything. Yeah, it depends on the course. So this fall, for example, I'm doing a class for first-year PhD students. So that's obviously fairly advanced. The class that's associated with the book over here, associated with the book over here is for first years just starting college.
Right.
So it's full spectrum.
Right.
Yeah.
So one thing we haven't really touched on is your work with discovery in the burn. And dilithium's a real thing, isn't it? I mean, in actual,
lithium is an atom, and dilithium would be like two. You would think it would be two lithium atoms together, but it wouldn't be this sort of crystal that has the properties that happens in Star Trek. So
that bit they made up.
Yeah, that bit they made up.
Do they just like the name dilithium?
I think so. Yeah. There's actually a lot of that.
Sounds good. Coming off the tongue.
Yeah.
They often pair these.
Especially in a Scottish brogue.
They often pair the prefixes because you have dilithium, they have tritanium, they have quadrotriticale. I always joke, and there's Zachary Quinto. Sorry, it's bad joke. Bad joke. That's five. Yeah. But in terms of the dilithium and the burn, this was the very first project that I had. And this was one that I was paired with Dr. Aaron McDonald on. And this, because it had a biological piece and a physical science piece. So what happened there, the plot for all of season 3 of Star Trek Discovery, sorry if this is a spoiler, but is that there was this alien, his name is Sukal. He's a Kelpian. That's a species, the same species as Saru, if you know him, played by Doug Jones. He is distraught about this terrible event that happens, and he screams. And somehow that scream makes all the dilithium everywhere just about blow up.
Right.
Because he's on a dilithium planet, and it amplifies his rage. Or his anger or sadness.
Dilithium controls the matter-antimatter reactions in all the ships. So every ship that had a dilithium drive just blew up right then. So this was a big disastrous event. Yeah.
And it's such a good story arc. I love that season of Star Trek.
Yeah. I enjoyed it too, though I'm biased. But they said, basically they presented that to us and said, okay, science that. That's again jumping into the deep end, like you said about Dragon Con.
What did that mean?
So
the burn meant that ships couldn't travel at warp speed anymore, and it was basically the end of the Federation. And in this season of Discovery, the Federation's barely holding on. Earth isn't even a member of the Federation anymore.
Yeah,
Discovery is a prequel to our show.
No,
it comes directly after our show.
It starts before the original series, but then they jump in season 3 to the far future.
To 900 years in the future.
Yeah.
So it starts after Enterprise, before the original series, and then the last 2 seasons are 900 years in the future.
I got to be honest, I have not seen an episode of Discovery.
It
yet.
is good.
Oh, it's fun.
I like it.
It's fun.
I should get on that as soon as possible.
Yeah, you can start with season 3. Actually, it's a decent place to start because essentially it's restarting the whole process because they've just jumped into the far future. So what we came up with, and we're working with obviously fiction, so there's definitely some leaps here. my part of this was to say okay, Su'Kal needs to be very radiation resistant because he's, as Mark said, he's on this dilithium planet that has lots of radiation, and we see Saru go there, and when he goes there, he's immediately starts having these boils on his skin. So something has to be different about him to both be radiation resistant and also to cause this galactic event. And then there's also the physical science piece, which I can say just a little bit about, but again, credit to Dr. Aaron McDonald for that. So what I suggested is that, so for all of us, as I mentioned earlier, we all have one copy of our genes from our mom, one copy from our dad. Under some sorts of stressful conditions, maybe in the presence of compounds or in the presence of radiation, sometimes you can end up getting 2. So you can essentially, instead of having 2 copies of your genes, you can have 4 or multiple. Right. This is very common in plants, and you see this in some fish and toads. You don't see it so much for mammals. But in theory, this is something that could happen. This is thought to be potentially a product of, again, stressful conditions or something like radiation. But also, I found one study in bacteria that suggested that maybe by having multiple copies like this, you actually have more templates, such that if some of your DNA strands gets broken, there's more templates you can use for repair.
Right.
So I said, hey, this potentially works. And Su'Kal was in this place, so maybe he's a polyploid. That makes him different. And what happened then is as part of being different, polyploids tend to not look exactly the same as the parental species. His vocal cords would have developed differently. So I suggested something like the opera singer thing. You know how an opera singer can scream and break glass potentially?
Right.
In his case, he's screaming, and what he's breaking, he's not actually breaking dilithium, but he's breaking the normal space and subspace components of dilithium. Right? So by doing that, dilithium is supposed to have both of these 2 components. This is going to Dr. Aaron McDonald's piece.
Right.
This then is something that can spread through subspace everywhere. And by having that, dilithium can no longer control this matter-antimatter reaction. So boom, literally boom.
Science, literally boom.
Science.
Yeah.
That made me hot.
Yeah. If you want to read more about it, we actually couldn't explain it.
Yes, I'm fanning myself with myself.
This is one of the challenges with consulting, that we can't have a whole seminar to explain something in the show. It has to be just a couple of quick lines.
Yeah.
Right. So what Dr. Aaron McDonald and I did is we wrote an article for StarTrek.com called "The Science Behind Discovery's Burn," and we laid out more step by step, so that way fans aren't like, that would never work. Well, here's the pieces that at least work. Obviously, again, it's fiction. The dilithium doesn't exist. Subspace probably doesn't exist. All these things. So
I'm curious about this too. We were talking about earlier about the ways in which certain mammals or insects communicate with one another.
Yeah.
Like dogs have an ability to communicate with one another in a different way that we do. Could we, in theory, figure that out?
Could we translate it?
Yeah.
Sure. You'd have to somehow get those chemicals and translate them. But yeah, no, absolutely. I don't think there would be.
Don't we? Pheromonally, isn't that for sexual mating and the like? Isn't that part of our?
It's always
certainly for a lot of
mating.
species that is absolutely true. So moths is a great example. Moths. There's some moth.
I was trying to be biological. I don't know if you noticed.
Right, it's good. That's good.
There's some moth. There's some moth males.
I could have jumped in on the dog line too. Kept my mouth shut there.
Oh,
sorry.
No, it's good. Oh, good. This is great.
It won't make the show.
Back to the moths.
So there's some moth males that have these very elaborate antennae, so they can actually detect exactly where the female is, because it's picking up these little tiny bits of particular chemicals and trying to track them down. So
so they're born stalkers.
Yeah.
Creepy.
Yeah.
Tell me about your T-shirt.
Oh, yes. So this is a picture of Guinan. It says on it, listener. Mm-hmm. This was designed by Melissa Longo, who many of you know, who comes from...
Who's right here.
Right.
Yeah. You want to come and say hi?
Yeah, come on in. Pick a camera. Any camera.
Hi.
You can get Melissa's shirts from theintrovertedrepublic.com, and she has a shop there called Walking Art Made by Melissa.
And you can listen and see her on the Seventh Rule.
On the Seventh Rule podcast.
Yeah. Indeed, you can.
We're thrilled to have you here.
Very,
Thank you.
very, very good friends of the show.
Yeah. And they say hello.
Oh,
by the way.
Hello, Seventh Rule.
Yay, Seventh Rule.
That was one of my mother's favorite sayings. God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. And he meant it in that proportion.
Well done.
She obviously didn't tell me often enough.
I gave you 6 mouths.
But
This right here, that's enough.
Oh, man.
I think that brings us swiftly
We have a gift
to
from
some
Jill
gifts.
Sheets.
Oh, bless Jill.
Can you hand these out?
Of course.
Well, let me hear it. I'll take it out so we don't get the address on camera.
I swear to God, I'm going to get home, I'm going to lie in bed tonight, and I'm going to go, I had another question.
Who's your favorite character on?
You can email me.
Who was your favorite trip on Enterprise?
Look at that. All right, let's try these on. Hang on. That's
Is that
all.
for me?
What does it say on it?
Did
Thank
Mohammed
you.
get one?
Nah, it's okay. I'm not a regular. It's
You
fine.
want mine?
Give me a
That's all good.
Sharpie.
That's all good.
Your favorite trip?
Ah.
All right. These are from Jill Sheets.
Nice.
Okay.
Cute.
Nice.
Oh, I like yours.
My big
Thank
fat,
you, Jill.
Thank you, Jill.
That's a good color.
My big
Thank you,
fat
Jill.
Very nice.
which welcomes
Thank you,
my big
Jill.
fat brain.
Look at
Got a
that.
big giant head. I don't know if this will fit.
Look at that. We should all go out for lunch.
Dinner table for four.
Oh, you're
for-
Connor. Shit.
Yeah, that's me.
Thank God for the hat.
Thank you.
I love it.
Thank you, Jill.
Yeah.
Bless you, darling.
Yeah, Jill also sent us all individual cards, so I'll pass those out. Yeah.
Thank you, Jill.
And
you.
sorry, Doctor.
That's okay. I'm not a regular. It's fair.
Yeah.
I don't mind.
She clearly despises you.
I don't, but I don't have a portrait like the one behind you.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, by our new resident artist, Nate.
Nate.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Nate.
Nate.
Well
Nate.
done.
No disrespect to Tiffan, because she's been amazing.
Oh yeah, her work is fantastic. Yeah.
Here.
Yeah. It's almost as though, he's painting in the 20th century and she's painting in the 19th.
Oh,
look at me go.
Look at you.
You're such an art person.
Art guy. Art person.
Art person. How sophisticated.
Which I think then gets us now to some fan questions.
Fan
probably.
questions.
Yes.
I peeked at some of them early
Oh, you did.
Where
I
did you
did.
find them?
on Patreon and Instagram.
Dr.
That's right, you said
Noor
you knew.
is a member of our he's a patron of ours, so he has access to all the questions that our patrons have been asking.
Okay.
I cheated.
Which is a first, was kind of weird. He
Right.
walked up to me this morning and said, "I've been reading all the questions already." I'm like, "Oh, you're cheating."
Who was your favorite
All right.
trip?
Are you ready?
Who's your favorite trip?
Annika from Patreon asks, most memorable Star Trek convention encounters.
Most memorable encounter. So I had a great one this year on the cruise. This was actually very moving. There was somebody who approached me and said, "Hey, I've gone to your genetics panels. I want to show you some genetic data." So there's these direct-to-consumer genetic testing companies, or not testing, genetic ancestry companies.
Like 23andMe.
Yeah, 23andMe,
Yeah.
Ancestry DNA, things like that. She said, "I want to figure out which of these two men is my father."
Oh, heavens!
Yeah,
Wow.
and she doesn't have their profiles because then it would be very easy.
Right.
And they're also brothers, so they're very closely related. But she has various descendants from either one of them, and said, "See if you can go through this data and figure it out." And amazingly, things were just lucky enough. There was a couple of coincidental things that worked out that we were able to figure out with very, very high certainty that this one person and not the other one was likely her dad.
On
She
the
didn't know
cruise.
who her father was.
She wasn't sure, no. But that
Wow.
was fascinating. And just
Wow.
being able to have that, help out this person in this way using genetics. And
That's amazing. I got a question about this.
Sure.
So I did 23andMe.
Yeah, me too.
I do know that most of my family is from Northern Europe.
Okay.
And my great grandmother on my father's side was at least 50%, maybe more, Choctaw.
Okay.
And so I had been telling people my whole life that I'm a Native American.
Yeah.
I take this test.
Yeah.
And it turns out for me that I am 99.5%
Caucasian?
white.
Yeah.
And this element of my great grandmother is literally in me,
Yeah.
hardly there.
Yeah.
Two questions on this.
I have a
one
great thing for you
is,
on this.
how legitimate is that? And two, would my siblings may have more than I do?
Oh,
'Cause I'll be
great
angry
question. Great question.
they do.
Well, let me start with the second one. The second one is yes, unfortunately. I'm sorry. It is quite
I
possible.
thought you
your
were going to
siblings
say,
might have
"Can
more
you
than
prove that I am genetically superior to my siblings?"
But But
That's my
actually,
third question.
but on the first question, there's a really important thing that I think a lot of people don't appreciate, that genetic ancestry and genealogical ancestry are not the same thing, and they don't have to match perfectly. So you could have a relative that 100% was yours, say 7, 8 generations back, and you could have literally 0 DNA from them.
Oh, wow.
Really?
Right? Yeah.
And your sibling could have some.
And your sibling might have some, though you could check by seeing if your parent didn't, then obviously your sibling couldn't.
Right.
But if your parent did, then it's possible.
So that passing, it can be random. Like that.
There's exactly the pieces that are passed on is not. It's not always like, it's not like paint where you're dividing it in half and things like that. It's you're taking some little pieces, and it's kind of like it's like taking a handful out of M&Ms out of a bowl.
Right.
So it's not a determining factor. There's no real. Again, it's like I got 11 green ones, and my sister got 4 or 20.
Yeah. I mean, they won't be wildly different usually, but they can be somewhat different.
That must be part of the evolutionary process.
It is absolutely part of the evolutionary process.
Yeah. The random factor ensures a greater survival.
Yeah, well, not necessarily the survival. Well, they could affect survival. If it affects survival, then it's natural selection. If it doesn't affect survival, we call it genetic drift. It's this population of that. If you look at the abundance of a particular variant in a population over generations, it'll just fluctuate stochastically.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Genetic drift,
which actually is used in Star Trek a few times, but incorrectly, because they say he's experiencing genetic drift. Like, no, it's not a person. A person doesn't have drift, but it sounds cool.
Yeah, great.
Great question, Annika.
Next question is from Sean Coleman from Patreon. Hi, Sean. I'm curious to your thoughts on what's the likelihood of a humanoid-like species that are bipedal existing in the universe, according to the current scientific understanding. Or is it more likely that aliens have 8 or more legs and look nothing like a Cardassian?
It's a great question. So the sad answer is they probably are not going to look like either of those things. I mean, the most likely thing I think we would see someplace else would be like some microbe. Because if you think about what was life on Earth for the first couple of billion years, it was all microbial, right?
Tough road.
Just a bunch of tech bros hanging out in the bottom of the ocean.
We're going to get this right. Do you think that we're alone?
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I would be shocked if we were the only. I mean, the universe is just so big. I would be shocked if we were the only origin.
Do you
of
think
life.
we've been contacted?
Oh, now we're getting into it.
That's a tough one. I don't think so. I've never seen anything that's that compelling for that. Though I do love, what's the name of the show that Robbie's the director for? Resident Alien.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that show.
Alan Tudyk.
Alan Tudyk, yeah, he's fantastic.
I've been contacted.
Connor was abducted.
Forward me the message.
You've been probed.
I've been touched.
We talk about it a lot. It's very embarrassing.
He goes to the spaceship every week.
How you guys doing?
He's back.
Hey, Cliff.
Anyway, another question.
Great. Sarah Falk from Patreon asks, would you rather be trapped in a swimming pool with a shark or a cage with a tiger?
Oh, I'm not a great swimmer, so I think I'm going to have to go with the tiger.
Yeah, okay.
And I don't know what I'm going to do to fight it off, because I mean, that's a terrifying
I give you 20
thought.
seconds.
Yeah, probably. That's optimistic.
Here, kitty.
Sorry, Sarah.
All right.
That's a great one.
Melissa H. from Patreon. Oh, you know her.
Oh, yeah. I know all these people.
Star Trek has many examples of unique species evolution, but not all are explained in a way that would be scientifically plausible. What is an example of an exobiological species, seen in Trek, that you believe could possibly exist under the right conditions?
Biological species seen in Trek that could possibly exist under the right. Well, under the right conditions is a great out there. I like that being in there. Again, I still like the idea of something microbial. So if you go back to, I think the first season of The Next Generation, there was this little thing that they called the microbrain. It was just this. It was something. It was microscopic. It just emitted a little bit of light and kind of flashed. The first pieces of that seemed like, okay, this is maybe possible. The one interesting thing there was it was silicon based rather than carbon based. That's a little bit less likely, but it's not impossible. So I like that aspect to it. It then they then started interacting with each other and took over the Enterprise and all these things. That got a little bit more out there.
We're alike.
But the first pieces to that actually I thought were really cool. And I thought that, okay, finally there's something microbial. But I mean, I guess it would be a boring show if they were just going around with little petri dishes trying to grow things up.
We've discovered new life. Hello,
Look
microbe.
at it.
There it is. Oh, look, it divided.
End credits.
Yeah, right, exactly.
We're all a bunch of voyeurs.
I could play one of those microphones.
Sean Thomas Kane from Patreon asks, is there ever any pushback in the academic world from your work with Star Trek?
That's a great question. I'd say 75% of the people I encounter are very positive. Like, that's so cool, because they love Star Trek too.
Mm-hmm.
They love the connection to Star Trek, and they think it's fascinating, and they like the outreach aspect. They say, oh, you're actually like reaching fans with stories to get them to learn science. So I always say my science talks are basically Trojan horses of science. It says Star Trek on the outside, but inside science pops out.
Right. I taught you something. You just learned.
There's non-zero numbers who looking like, oh, why are you doing that?
Oh.
And actually, even when I was writing this book, one of my colleagues, I almost gave too much specificity where somebody could figure out who it was. One of my colleagues made the comment, why don't you just write a book on science, teaching genetics and evolution? And my comment was like, there's 1,000 books on that already out there. Why would I just do another thing that's basically the same?
Right.
I said, let me take an angle on this. But yeah, there's a few people who kind of shake their heads, and all they do is listen to opera and watch PBS or whatever.
They're just jealous.
That's what I was going to say. Okay, great.
Nothing against opera, of course.
Mademoiselle Katie Carr from Instagram asks...
She's in France right now.
Ooh. Parlez-vous français?
Yeah, she does, apparently.
She does too.
What?
If you could be a science officer on any starship, which one would it be?
Oh, it's definitely the NX-01. I actually do love, and I'm not saying that because I'm here with you guys. I love the NX-01. I just love that submarine feel of going out there and exploring for the first time. I think that's fascinating. I mean, the Enterprise D from Next Generation, it's like a cruise ship. I mean, that's not exploration.
The chairs alone.
Yeah.
The lounge chairs.
Yeah.
It looks like there should be a one-armed bandit in front of it.
I do love Next Generation, to be clear, but I would definitely be on NX-01.
More Mai Tais, please. More Mai Tais.
All right. Our last question from Sam Monjovi. Warp drive question.
Oh.
When Enterprise engages warp drive, how exactly is the ship moving faster? Is it riding a warp bubble? Please explain. Thanks.
Yeah, this goes back to, I'm a biologist, not an engineer. Now, I've heard Dr. Erin McDonald talk about this, and what she says is that nothing can go faster than the speed of light. In terms of any sort of, actually, I can't remember even the way she says it exactly. It's like space-time can go faster than the speed of light, but something in normal space can't. So basically, if you do a bubble of space-time, that can move faster than the speed of light. Something like that. I'm not saying nearly as well as she would say. This is definitely her field, not mine.
My pay grade now.
Yeah, it's above mine too.
A bubble of speed, light speed.
Yeah. I met a guy.
That's a thing.
Yeah.
Were you there for this? I met a guy at the Inclusion and Diversity Convention in Philadelphia.
Oh yeah.
Gaze in Space hosted, and sat down with this guy at this function in the first night, and I said, I don't know you. What are you doing here? And he said that he founded a company that they have figured out.
Oh yeah, I remember him. Yeah.
They have figured out, I can put this in a way. So they figured out a drop in the ocean of warp drive, but to have warp drive, there's an ocean to make it work.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, I don't really
I'm
know.
a biologist.
What I remember Dr. Erin McDonald saying was that from early models, it looked like it would take all the energy in the universe to make it work, but then there were apparently something later which suggested it doesn't quite need all of it. So a little bit less than that.
I mean, once he said that, I think I went into soft focus and just kind of went like,
Yeah. Now this is way outside my specialty.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Oh, he took my ass off about it.
Did he?
Yeah, for quite a while.
Yeah. It's cool stuff though.
No.
Credit to the people who get it.
Yeah.
Right.
All right.
Very
Let's
good.
move on
All
to
right.
Star Trek
Thank you for all the
trivia.
questions.
No, that's it. Yeah. Time to
Star
play
Trek
some Star
trivia.
Trek
Time for
trivia,
the
guys.
trivia.
Mark. Just kidding.
You're a Patreon member and you watch the show, so you probably know the rules.
I know
It's
the rules.
you three against Mark.
Yeah.
And today we are playing for Patreon member That's on YouTube. That's their name.
That's on YouTube.
That's on YouTube.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dom, I
That's
feel
on
good
YouTube.
about
Thank
this
you. While Mark is playing for our
I know, we're up against Mark. It's
newest
tough.
member.
Oh, I'm playing for our brand newest member that we have currently. That is Eddie Roseberry, who
Thank
just
you,
became
Eddie.
a member.
Thank you, Eddie.
Thank
Ah.
you. Good on you, mate.
5 questions. Question number 1. What starship propulsion system typically provides thrust to the starship under sublight speed conditions? A, the warp drive, B, the fission drive, C, the impulse drive, or D, the solar sail? Woo!
Oh! Impulse.
Yes. Good on ya. Oh, this is going to be a shoe-in.
I don't know. Mark's awesome. I don't know. How do I clear it?
Mob, don't worry about the flashing. It'll just do that. It'll, it'll still turn amber when it's ready.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question number 2. In the Next Generation episode, Deja Q, Q is made human by the Q continuum and states that he possesses an IQ of what? A, 2005, B, 1 million, C, it's unmeasurable, or D, more than Picard?
2005.
Bing dong.
Good job, Mark.
1-1.
Ding, ding, ding.
Nuts.
He says it very condescendingly too.
Yeah.
By the way.
Question.
I can't imagine.
Right, why?
Why not? You know.
I can't imagine John Delancey doing that. That must have been a real acting job. Hey, John. Did he do it in a Russian accent?
Oh, if only.
Anyway.
Question number 3. In Enterprise, what is Captain Archer's favorite pastime sport?
Oh, yeah.
A, baseball, B, water polo, C, darts, or D, damjat?
Yes, got it. Water polo.
Water polo.
Woof, woof.
We all got that one. It was like, yes.
Great.
That was good.
It was an odd one, that, wasn't it, the choice? But
It's because Rick Berman's son was playing water polo.
Right. Yeah.
Question number 4. When Keiko O'Brien is injured during a runabout accident, her baby is transferred to what member of the crew as a surrogate? A, Major Kira, B, Dax, C, a Dabo girl, or D, none of the above?
Good job.
What is it?
Kira.
Kira.
What is it?
I don't know.
Random Darbo girl. I fancy.
Mark's like, I don't like this 3 against 1 now.
Suddenly the rules don't make sense.
What are we at? I don't know where we're at.
3-1.
3-1.
And last question. So.
3-1. All right.
Question number
We're
5.
winning this week.
In the Strange New Worlds episode, Among the Lotus Eaters, what happens to the crew when they beam down to the surface? A, they are eaten by cannibals. B, they are sold to pirates. C, they encounter the Gorn. Or D, they lose their memories.
They lose.
I want them.
They lose their memories.
They lose their memories.
Yeah, they lose their memories.
I'm going with the doctor. Whoa.
So we are playing
You can come back anytime, mate.
Thanks.
We might just get you back for this section every time. We'll take the guest out and put him back in. We're shooing every time. Nicely
We're
done.
playing for That's on YouTube. So that's on YouTube.
That's on YouTube. You get a brand new car.
Yeah. And
that big.
Eddie Roseberry, I'm sorry for losing for you.
I'm sorry, Eddie.
Woohoo! Don't take the Patreon membership away for that.
I guess now we go on to
Connor's remote
Well, like to hang
the-
out there with Connor?
Connor's remote island. No, I'm not
Connor's
there.
deserted
But
island.
they're all sort of posited around one another.
Oh, okay. We can wave to
It's a
the next
collection
island.
of islands.
Right. So you're
an
He's the one in the
archipelago.
big house.
yeah, exactly. Right. Mine's got a pool. So you are given the works of Shakespeare and whatever religious text you would like.
Okay.
And then what you get your favorite cuisine.
Okay.
You get your favorite author,
Okay.
musician,
Okay.
and dessert.
Okay.
And then you get a bonus item.
Oh, okay.
Right. And the bonus item, we have to be clear about this, it cannot get you off of the island.
Got it.
Right.
Can't be a boat.
Right. Can't be a boat. So, your author.
My Arthur, I'm going to go with Arthur C. Clarke.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
Very good.
Yeah.
I always liked reading his books. I mean, I haven't read any recently. Well, obviously, there haven't been any new ones, but I haven't
He was,
reread any.
he really was the forerunner of pretty much all this thought, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. No,
and
he was
way
fantastic.
ahead of his time.
Totally.
Yeah.
No, that
Quite
was
remarkable when you see some of the interviews he gave talking about stuff like, how did you even know that?
Right?
That 40, 50 years later, that would be just as you described.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty
I
amazing.
was in St. Paul de Vence one time before a show had just finished and aired a couple episodes, but it hadn't done so in Europe, and rented an Airbnb and knocked on the door, and this guy opens it, and he looked at me, and he was like, "You're Trip Tucker." And I was like, "How do you know?" And he said, because he had satellite television. Very wealthy guy.
Yeah.
Spent the evening with him and his wife, and he had 2 or 3 signed Arthur C. Clarke books.
Wow. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
And a piece of Mars.
Piece of Mars.
And
One of the Martian meteorites. It could be. There are Martian meteorites I could get. Yeah, that would be possible.
Is he a patron?
I don't know whatever happened to him.
Oh.
Yeah. There's so many books for Arthur C. Clarke too, so there'd be a lot to read. That's another advantage to it. It's not a small collection.
Right, and that's what you want.
Yeah.
Because you're there for your whole life.
Yeah. Well, I have the advantage of having watched the show like for every episode, so I've had time to think about this one.
Right.
I was going to say, you
All
might
right.
have to think
So
about.
your cuisine.
Yeah. Honestly, I mean, it sounds simple. But I just love Italian. There's
Nothing
one
simple about Italian.
Yeah, the one extra piece is I want a lot of lactase pills since I just recently became lactose
you don't
intolerant.
have that problem on your remote
Oh,
eye.
yeah.
Okay, perfect.
See, there you go.
There you go. So I'm good.
Or that's your
Actually, I have a
bonus,
funny
or that's your
story.
bonus item, maybe.
No, I'm not using it for that. I have a funny story about lactose intolerance. I'll come back to in a minute.
You're a musician.
Musician. I mean, honestly, the Beatles. I mean, it's hard to beat that.
Yeah.
I mean,
it
again,
really is, isn't
giant catalog, really, really great stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's what you're gonna have to listen to forever. I mean, I love Pink Floyd. I love a lot of other things too, but the Beatles.
Prolific.
I mean, yeah.
It's a great T-shirt.
And amazing.
Yeah.
It is, isn't it? God bless you. Thank you, Sandra.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Sandra, I like the Beatles too. I like Led Zeppelin as well.
He likes T-shirts.
I love T-shirts.
Yeah.
And where are we at with
Dessert.
Cookies.
There you go.
I love
You're
cookies.
just taking cookies.
What's
Yeah,
your
I
favorite?
love cookies. And actually,
You're
I always
all
tell my
cookies.
family that for my birthday, I don't want a cake. I want a cookie cake. I love those things. They're so good. It's cookies.
See?
Cookies are where it's at.
What's your favorite cookie?
I just love chocolate chip. I mean, it sounds simple,
Yeah.
but like it's so good.
That's the
like, how do you
best.
beat perfection?
Yeah, exactly. And your bonus item.
What else? A TV.
Oh, to watch Star Trek.
Exactly. Well done. That was exactly it.
Wow.
Why? I didn't think That's why he's a fucking professor, isn't it?
So, funniest thing about lactose
Unbelievable.
intolerance. Did you know that if you go back 10,000 years ago, all humans were lactose intolerant? All humans were lactose intolerant. Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Well, there you go. And I mean, that's we're the only animal on the planet that still uses milk after we're weaned.
Exactly.
That's a fact. Isn't it?
That's what happened. So something like 7,500 years ago in European populations, this happened in multiple places, but focusing on the Europeans for just a second. About 7,500 years ago, a new mutation arose in European populations that had been trying to use, milk from cows for. Obviously, let me clarify.
Cows
Lactose
weren't a
intolerant
real
as
animal.
adults. Yeah.
Cows weren't an animal 7,500 years ago, were they?
Well, I mean, basically, they're using pre-cows,
There's
basically.
pre-cow, yeah.
Pre-cow. But this allowed this extra source of nutrition. So natural selection then allowed this to spread because here are these people who had this extra source of nutrition from there on out. So then, between 7,500 years ago and today, now most Europeans are lactose intolerant. Different mutation arose in Africa to do the same thing.
Really?
Just a little bit later, I think it was like 5,000 years ago or something like that. So we have these different origins of lactose intolerance. And again, babies were never lactose intolerant because that would obviously be very bad. they would die immediately.
Be a tough
but
way to go.
again, what would normally happen is the gene that allows you to digest lactase basically just would shut off around age 5, 6, whatever, something like that. And there was never any cost to that. But then all of a sudden, when people started doing this thing with cows or camels, for my ancestors, then there became this possible source of extra nutrition, and natural selection allowed lactase persistence to spread. So anybody who's not lactose intolerant is essentially a mutant because
Really?
that's the derived form.
What about gluten intolerance? Is that
That I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Damn it, because
Yeah.
I'm gluten
I have a
intolerant.
feeling. Well, I have a feeling that's the processing that's taken place in the last 75 years.
Yeah.
Well, not having ancient grains and
We've turned wheat into big blow. I mean, a real wheat only has a
wheat
few
shock
little,
is
and we made them with.
But I have heard that Northern Europeans are more likely to have gluten intolerance.
Oh, interesting.
So there you go.
Fun fact.
They can drink all the milk and eat all the cheese they like.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And
Potatoes and
I must say, I think milking a camel must be easier because you can stand up while doing
It's
it.
true. Good point. Good point.
That's so dumb. Thank God we do this show.
I do think that we should also at this time thank the Rogue Machine Theater
Oh yes.
Yeah.
for having us here, who are in residence here at the Matrix. We're
Thank
up
you,
here
Rogue.
in the bird's nest where it's hot as blazes, and
But we're very grateful
we're
to be
very,
here.
very, very
Totally,
grateful
totally.
to be able to be here, and want to thank you, Mohamed, for
yeah,
coming here.
bless you,
What a
man.
fantastic.
It was
Been a great
chat we've
discussion.
had.
truly an honor and pleasure.
Yeah.
And I've loved the show from day one. I've been watching you guys from the very beginning.
Thank
I
you,
love
mate.
the show. It's an
Thank you.
honor to be here and be a part of it. So thank you for having me.
Yeah,
Thank
you are
you.
part of our canon, and I would say you are the first scientist that we've had. And we are the first
Yeah.
scientist, real one.
Yeah. First real doctor.
Yeah.
First real
Honored.
We've had some
doctor.
good pretend doctors.
Yes.
God bless you,
Thank
John.
you.
God
Right.
bless you, Bob and Gates.
Yeah. Thanks for a great
Not
show.
real
all of you.
doctors.
Yeah.
No, sorry.
So,
I believe we have a gift for
Oh, yes.
Doctor.
we do.
So we are going to,
We have you some-
in your name, donate to PanCan.
Oh, thank you.
very good.
Great song. Yeah.
And we're going to get you
Kudos.
some cookies.
Oh,
Oh,
yes.
yeah. We must get you cookies.
I was going to say earlier, I wish I'd known about your cookie love. We'd have thrown some cookies at you.
Ah,
Do you
it's all
have a
good.
toffee love too?
Pardon me?
Do you have a toffee?
I have more.
He gave us toffee this morning.
Yeah.
That was very
Chapel
nice of
Hill
you.
toffee, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry for the wrong. Sorry, it's the wrong blue.
Yeah, not to be mistaken for Duke toffee.
Yeah, we don't have any Duke toffee, unfortunately. I would have brought that. If that
He
was-
brought us some toffee, and it's
Yeah.
very good. I couldn't wait. So
Oh,
thank
good.
you.
Glad you
It's very
enjoyed it.
good.
Thank you.
Not an honor. We'll see you in Vegas, baby.
Yeah.
I'll be there. I look forward
Yeah.
to seeing all of y'all.
Thank you,
again.
baby, to you, sir.
Doctor.
Dr. Baby to you. Thank you.
Thank
Dr.
you,
Mohamed
guys.
Noor.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Nanu, nanu.
Yay.
Good work in India. I like it.
Phaser fingers.
Oh my God.
There we go.